Guillermo Del Toro's Pinocchio is an incredible technical achievement in animation and puppetry. Del Toro chose to revive an older technique, stop-motion animation, instead of relying on CGI to animate the film. The result is truly breathtaking on a technical scale, but does it serve the storytelling, and also, is this darker version of Pinocchio intended more for adults than kids? Just a word of warning, in case you don't want to know anything about the movie, I will be discussing minor plot details. During World War I, a carpenter, Geppetto, loses his son, Carlo, during a bombing airstrike. Mourning the death of his son, he plants a pine tree over his grave. A talking cricket named Sebastian J. Cricket takes up residence inside the tree. In a drunken rage, Geppetto cuts the tree down in order to carve a new son out of its wood. A fairy of the woods grants life to the wooden boy and names him Pinocchio. The grim setting of World War I sets the overall dark tone. One nice little detail is when Sebastian J. Cricket, who is brilliantly voiced by Ewan McGregor, is setting up house in the pine tree that will eventually become Pinocchio. He hangs on the wall a framed picture of the 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. This is interesting since Schopenhauer was known for his dark, pessimistic philosophy. In his philosophy, our reason and free will, our very ego and consciousness, were seen as empty illusions, which were ultimately subordinate to blind, irrational forces beyond our control or comprehension. The shocking devastation of 2 world wars seemed like a horrific realization of Schopenhauer's grim philosophy, where human progress seemed to be just a vehicle of chaos leading to greater destruction, particularly in the form of fascism and authoritarianism, a theme running throughout Del Toro's Pinocchio. Fascism is a recurring theme in Del Toro's movies, who often uses the fantasy and fairy tale genre to explore the dangers of blind subservience to authority. I think the fairy tale structure works so well because fairy tales often revolve around questions of obedience and disobedience in the form of magical taboos or laws, which, in Pinocchio, is expressed in the taboo against telling a lie. Pinocchio is told by everyone around him to obey and conform, which, in the movie, has a more insidious connotation in the passive acceptance of authoritarianism under Mussolini's fascist regime. I think the film is quite brilliant in the way it taps into the underlying themes of its source material, such as morality, goodness, and obedience, and connects them with darker adult issues. Del Toro's Pinocchio reminds me of Hayao Miyazaki's work. They both use fantasy not to escape from reality, but as a way of connecting us deeper with our human experience, as well as what lies beyond it. I was also very moved by this version of Pinocchio's profound sense of empathy for all living creatures, which is embodied in the nature spirits, fairies, and talking animals, whose magic has animated Pinocchio and brought him to life. Del Toro also nicely connects the subject matter of Pinocchio with the way he crafted the movie. It's just not a movie about a puppet, it's also one that was created and animated using real puppets. I like Del Toro because he is willing to take creative risks to enhance his storytelling. His use of stop motion and puppetry is a perfect example of this. I was overjoyed to discover that the Jim Henson Company collaborated with Del Toro to create the puppets. Toby Froud was one of the puppeteers on the film. If you're a fan of Jim Henson's Labyrinth, then you'll remember that Toby Froud was the baby abducted by David Bowie's Jareth in that film. Toby is also the son of legendary illustrator and concept artist Brian Froud, who worked on both Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. Indeed, the artistry on display in Pinocchio bears the stamp of Henson's work. The physical sets and puppets were handcrafted by individual puppeteers and artisans. This is not your typical factory conveyor belt approach to filmmaking. The individual artists were each given breath to shine. Del Toro talks about how he wanted the puppeteers to embrace the imperfections and accidents in their performance. If the puppets' gestures and movements looked too pristine and clean, it wouldn't be convincing. In order to really sell it, they had to simulate the messy, unfiltered aspects of movement, gesture, and expression. The use of stop motion was perfect for this, since stop motion has an inherent choppiness and messiness to it that is really grounding. This level of texture and detail creates a really immersive experience. I also see this use of stop motion as part of a nostalgic tendency in modern movies. Despite the incredible advances in digital technology, I think a lot of us, myself included, are feeling the loss of the tactile and the physical, and it's why an overuse of CGI, despite its smooth rendering of lifelike motion, can often leave one emotionally numb. There's no physical anchor to ground it, unless there's a motion capture actor on set to create a sense of embodied movement and expression. And even then, you sometimes just can't escape the flatness that comes from a green screen performance. As a longtime champion of practical effects, I loved the visceral, tactile immersiveness of the animation style. It's a movie that I think would greatly benefit with each viewing. I would approach it like you would a Miyazaki movie. It's not just for the kids, but I also think it doesn't want to talk down to children either. Many children's fairy tales have been watered down from their more disturbing original versions. Pinocchio is no different. In the original novel, Pinocchio killed Jiminy Cricket with a hammer, who comes back as a ghost. Yes, Del Toro's version is incredibly grotesque and disturbing, but it is also incredibly moving and beautiful. All the voice actors are terrific as well. I do think it's a masterpiece in animation and storytelling, and I'll be watching this one again. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't, please like and subscribe, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.